So welcome to the 10x recovery project description. In this video I'm going to show you the concept of our project and how it will help to fight climate change or to reduce climate change with a certificate token on the Bitcoin blockchain. And I will show you the impact it has on the economy and on politics, and in the end I will show you a calculation about different countries and how much return on investment you could gain with such a token by reforestation and owning forests. So let's get started. So at first here on the right side you see an organization. This is our organization, 10x Recovery, and we are issuing CO2 tokens proportional to the carbon binding forest owner are doing with their trees. And we are just going to calculate how much the owner of a forest is binding per year, and we will give them the CO2 tokens for the last year. By random selection, we will create an estimation of how much carbon binding they did, and we will calculate back how much CO2 they did bind from the atmosphere. So, and the forest owner, they have now an additional source of income, and they can sell it on the free market. And to whom, the question is. So of course companies are buying the CO2 tokens for their carbon emissions, because they are producing CO2, for example oil industry, farmers, individuals who drive a car, and they can buy a CO2 token for their carbon emission and burn it. So, but they're first buying the CO2 token from the forest owner, because the forest owner, they filtered out the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they gain an additional income for this amount of CO2, and they sell it to the companies. And companies can also use it for marketing to attract more customers to their green label that they're carbon dioxide free. And in fact we see it because many people say, why would companies buy these CO2 tokens? We see it already that many companies want to be CO2 at a CO2 zero level, and are buying back with centralized donations, for example. But the problem is that they are not transparent, and there's not a free market for these tokens. So forest owners are selling CO2 tokens to companies, and CO2 producing companies are paying the forest owner. So in the last step, they have to burn these CO2 tokens to get them out of circulation, because if they're just holding them, they could sell it again, and there wouldn't be a loss for the company. But of course, the intention is that CO2 producing companies are paying for the emissions. So they have to burn these CO2 tokens because they emitted the CO2 back to the atmosphere again. And if they're doing this, they have to burn the correct amount of CO2 token to this address, 1x recovery xxx and so on, and the end is just a checksum. So basically it's just for verification that the address is correct. And if we're sending basically the CO2 tokens to this address, we can see it on the blockchain how many people burned the addresses, and we can look up what company burned what amount of CO2 token and when, and we can verify they did it. Basically, society can force companies to practice this concept, because everyone can look it up on the Bitcoin blockchain, and how that's basically how society can implement this concept. in the economy. So what impact does it have if we are doing such an CO2 certificate trading on the Bitcoin blockchain? So the first point is it makes it much more attractive for forest owner to own forest and also to invest in reforestation. Because if you take a German forest, for example, the main source of income is selling wood, and also another half of the gain or of the yield of a forest comes from the value increase. Of course, we cannot influence the value increase. That's up to inflation and the market, of course. But if we pay also for the carbon binding on top of that, the German forest owner could gain as much as they're gaining from selling trees. So basically, or from selling wood, they would make approximately the same amount of profits on top of it. So, and for CO2 producers, they are burning. For example, we can say that we nowadays politicians, they want to ban a lot of things, and they are saying, for example, we want to ban coal mines, but let's move to what's the term again? Sorry for that. I have to look it up because German is my first language. Let's move to natural gas, because natural gas is much more carbon efficient. But the problem with saying this is that natural gas is also polluting the atmosphere with CO2, but not as much as coal. But maybe coal is much more profitable. So why should we ban coal mines in favor for natural gas? If we could just say an owner of a coal plant has to buy back the correct amount of CO2 token and burn it on the blockchain, and the owner of a natural gas plant has to do the same thing. He has to buy less CO2 token because it produces less, but they also have to burn it on the blockchain. And then in the end of the day, both power plants are carbon free, and we can look at what technology is more profitable at a zero emission rate, and that's much better than discriminating one technology in favor for the other, because this is just a game of how much influence you gain on politics to favor your electricity generation. So CO2 producers can burn CO2 on the blockchain, and the CO2 was taken out of the atmosphere before, because we're paying it only out for forest owners, and that's the only way how CO2 tokens are getting on the market. And of course, it will be the most profitable where land is the cheapest. And it makes no sense to say, oh yeah, we want to bind all the CO2 in the central station of New York, because that's a crowded place, and we need this for labor, for people to work. And of course, it makes no difference if we do carbon binding in Russia or in Germany. Just that Germany is much more populated, and that we are blocking this area for construction sites, for example. So yeah, it's no technology can be discriminated against each other, as I already said, because for example, a nuclear power plant, they don't have to buy back CO2 token and burn them, because they are already zero emission free. So basically, we can force technologies to burn the amount of CO2 token they are emitting in the atmosphere, and then we can let it be to the free market to decide which technology should be used by our economy, and not to politicians. Okay, and the most profitable technologies will be able to stay in business because they are making so much profit that they are always buying back CO2 token and burning them on the blockchain. So basically, governments cannot say anymore that they want to ban it because it's polluting the atmosphere. So, and because of this CO2 token concept, the free markets decide on the price and not politicians. And that's much better because if we do this CO2 token concept, supply and demand are controlling the price. We don't set a fixed price because fixed price also always leads to inefficient markets. And the economic output doesn't get kept by governments because at the moment governments want to say our economy only is able to emit this amount of CO2 and that's it. After this, you cannot emit CO2 anymore into the atmosphere. But with our concept, the company can just say, okay, we want to emit CO2 into the atmosphere, but we are also building a forest which consumes the same amount of CO2 we are producing, and we are not capping economic output by saying this. And the benefits for forestry is that they have an additional source of income they can invest into these. For government, they don't have to anymore to cut back on the GDP. They can just implement CO2 token and can say we trust this organization or this organization by issuing CO2 token, and just all the other companies in our country, they have to align to these CO2 token concept. So companies can attract customers by creating a zero CO2 emission green label, and that's maybe in other countries it's already more established, as in poor countries, for example. But as also poor countries are getting more wealthy, customers will be attracted to these green labels and are more willing to buy these products. And individuals, they can also buy and burn CO2 token, for example, for their car driving, and they can check who burned what amount of CO2 and when did they burn it. So in the next step, I want to present the financials of the CO2 token and the profitability. So the problem nowadays is that governments, they want to set the price of a CO2 token. So, and for this calculation, I will just create another spreadsheet to show you why it doesn't make sense how we're doing it at the moment. So the first I want to show you how much a forest would generate in Bavaria. So the forest area in Hectare. So I get these numbers from this website, Bavarian State Forest. And we are basically taking now the forest area of Bavaria. We are calculating what market value this forest has, and then we are estimating how much profit people would do by such an investment into the forest. So let's say, so this website says that Bavaria owns 808,301 hectare of forest. So the annual cubic meter growth is 6.1 million. So that basically means trees are growing 6.1 million cubic meter per year. So we can already calculate how much a cubic meter it is per hectare. So that's 7.5 cubic meter per hectare. But it's not, it's just a number, not a currency. Okay, I think there's just a bug here in the software. Okay, now it works again because it was fixed on the currency. So that's 7.5 cubic meter per hectare. And the Greenpeace magazine, they are saying it's also possible to grow 12 meter cubic meter per year and hectare. We will just take this number for later calculations and save it here. So the next step is the average hectare price. Also the average price per hectare in Germany is 12,700 euros. So, and I have this number from, of course, Bavarian. One could argue that Bavarian forests are a bit more expensive than forests in Germany in general. Okay, I get this number from tabagra.com. And the next step is the cubic meter price, because we know that a forest owner, they can sell wood and make profit by doing this. So the average cubic meter price is 50 euros per cubic meter. And I have this number from Manager Magazine.de. So that's already a wood income of the annual growth multiplied by the price for 1 cubic meter. So that's 305 million euros of wood income. Sorry. So next we are calculating how much. So basically, a forest owner, they have 3 different sources of income. So first, they can sell trees. Second, they can hunt. And we are providing, and third, they can harvest fruits and sell them, but we are not including fruits here because this is making it more complicated. So we are not considering food harvesting here. But they can also hunt and sell the organic meat on the market. So they can sell it more expensive because free running deers are more popular on the market, or not popular, but are worth more. So and we want to enable them to sell CO2 certificates, and they are binding 1 ton of CO2 per cubic meter. And from a forestry YouTube video, I know that the hunting income per hectare is between €5 and €25. So we will just take the average, which is €14.5 per hectare. And also we know that the forest increases in value, and this is also dependent on the inflation rate. But we are going to say that the value increases 4% per year. So that's a capital gain. Okay, I don't know. Okay, next we have the total hunting income for the Bavarian forestry. So that's basically the hunting income per hectare multiplied by the area of a forest. So that's about 7 million euros. And the annual CO2 binding in tons. So for this one we have to we need a CO2 price per ton. So at the moment forest owners don't receive anything, but we want to change that with our project, because if governments are taking the CO2 price from one side, they also have to pay out the other side, because otherwise it's just not fair and doesn't work. It doesn't gain anything for society if they're just taking money and nothing happens with the money other than just creating more expenses in the government. Okay, so annual CO2 binding in tons. So that's then multiplied the CO2 per cubic meter multiplied by the cubic meter multiplied by the price. And that's 0. Okay, if we say 10, it goes up. Okay, so that's working. So and next we calculate the market value of the forest. So that's the average price for simplification multiplied that by the forest area. So we say the forest is 10 billion euros worth. And also we are not considering food harvesting and expenses, because of course you also have to pay employees for maintaining the forest. So then we have a wood income of okay, we already calculated this number, 305 million. So now we calculate the return on investment, because we have 305 million of wood income and calculating it of how much money we need to buy the forest. So that's 2.9 percent, and that's a good number, and it's also a realistic number, because I found it on multiple websites that return on investment, the yield is about 3% for a forest. The hunting return on and investment is the total hunting income multiplied by the market value of the forest. Okay, much lower, 0.1%. So basically, forest owners are doing it more because they have to, and to control the population, that their diseases are not spreading across deers and wild boars. And yeah, and it's also a duty to a forest owner to shoot deer and boar and so on. Next, we calculate the CO2 return on investment, and this is at the moment, of course, 0%. So wood hunting and CO2 return on investment is about 3%. So this is quite realistic. But we also have to include capital gains, because if our investment is increasing in value, this is also some kind of profit. It's comprehensive income is the term for this. So basically we are just adding the 4%, and we have 7% right here. So okay, but what is the problem now? Because at the moment a forest owner maybe have a yield of 7% per year. So that's just like the stock market. Because if forest would have a higher yield, like 11%, more people would buy forests, it would increase the value, and the yield would go down again to the same as the stock market, ETF, for example. And if the yield of the stock market ETF is 7%, then the average yield for forest is also 7%. So in general. But if we now say, for example, the Green Party, they want to price carbon dioxide by 15 euros, and they are probably now forming the next government in Germany since the election this month in 2021. So they want to get 50 euros per ton of CO2, but the problem is they are not giving it out to forest owner, but they should, because if they are pricing carbon dioxide from one end, they should also pay out the other end. And if they would pay out 50 euros, because that's the price of carbon, we would have forest owner. I don't own a forest, so just to make it clear, forest owners would gain 305 million additional. And you already see that it happens to be just the same amount as the wood income amount. So basically they would gain the same on top of it. And it would increase the total return on investment to 10%. Now if the return on investment goes up because they are generating more source of income, it would also, market forces would also create a new equilibrium. And for example, the president of the Federal Environment Agency, he just said that he would like to see a price of 100 euro per ton of CO2, but that's just not realistic, because when the average forest would make a yield of 13%, and its market forces would lower the value again to 7%. So let's say the prices increase to 30,000 euros, because now many people want to invest in the forest. This basically lowers the value already to 6%. But they also would invest more in reforestation. Basically, they could say that they are maximizing the annual cubic meter growth to 9.6 million cubic meter, and then they are also generating more CO2 binding income and wood income. Okay, and this is already increasing the return on investment. So, and keep in mind that by paying out forest owner, they would also bind more CO2, and this would lower the return on investment again, because the supply also increases, and this is good for the environment, and this is also good for the climate, according to scientists. So next, let's see how it looks if we move far more east into the Czech Republic. The forests of the Czech Republic. Got it right here. Okay, Republic. So I'm just going to copy it from another sheet. So basically, the hectare price is much cheaper. It's 12 to 25 Czech crowns per square meter, I think. And this is when, so this was 12,700 in Germany, and here the prices are probably half of this in Germany. And basically, we say we own 200 cubic hectare of forest, and this is our cubic meter growth annually. Then we are generating this amount of wood income, 72,000, and 120,000 euros of annual CO2 binding. So this is generating a total return on investment of 7.8%. So it's far more profitable to bind CO2 and to grow trees where land is cheap. This also makes sense. But if we now say the German government wants to price 100 euro per ton of CO2, then they should also pay it out to forest owner in the Czech Republic, because it doesn't matter for the climate if 1 ton of CO2 gets captured in the Czech Republic and stored, or if it gets stored in Germany. So basically, this will generate 26% of annual return on investment. And what kind of investor wouldn't want such a high yield? But this additional supply would decrease the CO2 price to a more reasonable number, like maybe €4, because this would stagnate to 7% if we have globalism and free trade. So basically, it's even profitable, very profitable, if we have. It's really profitable if we have just an CO2 price of €3 per ton of CO2. So basically, this is still 9%, and this is a really good interest rate for the forest. So now let's make it even more extreme. Let's move our forest to Russia. So, and the prices in Russia, they are not here. They're 7,000. So in Germany, they're maybe 13,000 euros per hectare. And in the Czech Republic, they're maybe 7,000 euros per hectare. But in Russia, it's even more extreme. The prices there are 120 euros per hectare. So I have this from a Russian marketplace, this number, because it hasn't been a long time since private forest owning is possible in Russia, I think, and it's hard to get official numbers if Russian is not your first language. So, but yeah, you can get a forest for 120 hectare per euros per hectare. So this is also multiplied with 12 to get the annual cubic meter growth. But this forest is of course standing in the nowhere, and it's hard to get there. But you could still invest in reforestation and plant trees, because they are always, not always, but most of the time there are some villages nearby where you also could get labor from. And the cubic meter price is also, we calculated here that the price is not 50 euros anymore, like in Germany, but it's 30 euros. So in Russia you can sell it anymore for 50 euros or 30 euros. It's more like 2 euros per cubic meter. Hunting income, we just said that we don't receive anything from hunting. But this is of course not correct. Maybe it's also like €1 per hectare. And the CO2 price is now 50 euros, like the Green Party says. But this would mean that we would still gain the wood selling return on investment with 20%, just with €2 price per cubic meter, because the area, the land is just so cheap. And the return on investment for CO2 would be 500%. And that's just unrealistic to have 500%. And this is also proving that a CO2 price of 50 euros is not realistic. It's anyway anything but realistic. And even if the German government says they are paying 100 euros they want to take 100 euros per ton of CO2, they also have to pay a Russian forest owner 100 euro per ton of CO2. If they're doing it, this Russian forest owner, even if we say he doesn't gain anything from selling wood, and he doesn't hunt, and maybe he doesn't even get capital gain because nobody is interested in this land and there's no marketplace for that. Even if we say that he doesn't get any additional income, but if the German government says 100 euros per ton of CO2, they would still make a return on investment of 1000%. And this just proves that these numbers they don't make any sense at all, and we have to have a free market to adjust the price, and we cannot take a price from a central authority. So if we calculate now a price from with €1 per CO2, the yield would already go down to 10%. And now we say again €2 per cubic meter and maybe €3 of hunting income. Yeah. So then we have a really good return on investment. Yeah, and this is basically what I wanted to show you guys, that it's not realistic to say central authority should take money per ton of CO2. It should always go both ways, and we need a free market to adjust the price, and this is what we are trying to do with 10x recovery, because with our project we can simply issue tokens to forest owner, they can sell it, and we have we can create market efficient CO2 trading. Yeah, if you like this project, you can go to our website 10xrecovery.org, and you can follow us on Twitter and on YouTube. Yeah, and this is basically it for this video, and I will see you again in the next video.